Welcome back to the Spicy Take Sports Podcast, and we finally got the whole crew together. God, it's been a while.
Boys.
It's been so long.
Long time
so
no
sweet.
see. It's only been like 2 months.
Not quite 2 months, but about a month.
It was wasn't it before the college football playoff?
No, we did the playoff, and we did like the whole playoff stuff, and we did the NFL playoff stuff.
Yeah.
You're right. A month and a half.
It's been about a month, yeah.
A month, yeah.
But either way, we're back. A lot of crap happened already. We just put the college football podcast up, so y'all need to go ahead and watch that too. But this is gonna be the NFL one. A bunch of stuff happened. Last video we had for the NFL stuff, we had our playoff predictions, and I don't think any of us came even close to getting them right. Kind of a quick little thing about your overall view about how the playoffs happened, and if you saw anything that you think could be trends for the future.
Well, I definitely see some GMs potentially giving up draft picks for veteran players, kind of like what the Rams did. I mean, that's how they won the Super Bowl. They would have no first-round picks for the next
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, several years. But hey, they paid off. They won a Super Bowl ring. So, I mean, getting Von Miller and getting Matthew Stafford and getting rid of Jared Goff, it cost them with picks eventually. I mean, but hey,
Jalen Ramsey too.
Jalen Ramsey. I mean, there's Odell. Didn't they have to give up some picks for Odell?
No, he was cut.
Oh, he was
Yeah,
cut.
yeah.
But still, I mean, they still have to take on that contract too. So, I mean, yeah, it's a lot. But I think that's kind of a new way some teams will kind of start looking at building teams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thing at the end of it, maybe this is coming from admittedly a salty Packers fan. I was thinking about those. I don't think those were the two best teams in the NFL playing at the end. It was kind of an interesting Super Bowl because usually I would say at least one team makes it through the entire way where I'd say it's the best team in the NFC or the best team in the AFC, And this year, I don't think either of those teams were the best teams in their respective conferences. I mean, they were good. Don't get me wrong. Particularly the Bengals. But I think the Bills were a better team, and they just kind of got unlucky there at the end against the Chiefs.
I think the Chiefs were a better team.
Yeah, I don't know. The Chiefs kind of reverted back to their early season form there at the end,
Yeah.
And then on the NFC side, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think I'm 100% sure the Packers were a better team than the Rams because they beat that same Rams team bad back when they played him in like a little over halfway through the season. I guess Odell wasn't fully integrated into the offense yet, but still it's a pretty similar team. And I mean, honestly, I think that, I don't know. I think the Buccaneers were a better team that just got off to a bad start and stuff. It was weird playoffs. It was really interesting, but weird playoffs.
Yeah. I kind of agree with kind of both of those points. I do kind of push back a little bit about the draft picks because I think this is just a really weird circumstance. I think the reason that the Rams went that heavy in is they had to get it done this year because their teams are gonna fall apart the next 2 years because of how many big time players they have on expiring deals the next couple of years, and they're already in cap hell already. So I mean, I think they kind of went all in. They're like, well, let's get one while we can because these first round picks aren't going to do enough right now. So I think it could happen for some teams like they're in that situation where you could see some big time moves being made for big time players, but it could backfire it could hurt them long term. But if they get that one ring, it's worth all of it, obviously. But I do agree with as well about it didn't seem like these were the two best teams in the Super Bowl from either conference. I mean, I think the Bills were better than the Bengals. I think the Chiefs were better as well. I mean, the Chiefs got out to a 21-3 start, and then offensive play calling became very, very questionable. Very, very questionable. And then, I mean, now there's rumors that apparently Pat Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy had a huge falling out going into that second half, and it kind of shows that might be part of the reason Bieniemy didn't end up getting a job in the offseason. But I mean, I think that the Bengals definitely performed when necessary. We all kind of thought they were going to have a pretty solid playoffs. But don't really think they were the best team in the AFC. And then NFC, I think the NFC was just so wide open this year. I mean, the Packers were good, but they had some obvious flaws. The Bucks were good, but had some obvious flaws. I mean, Cardinals had some flaws. Every team in that playoffs rings had flaws in the NFC and the AFC. There was never like really that great team this year, and no team really asserted themselves as a great team. So I mean, the Rams did what they needed to do to get it done. But I will say, I think that game kind of summarized kind of just summarized a lot of the season, in my opinion. We kind of get into that in a little bit. But for me, I think that game was a good game with two really good teams, like a really good game with two really good teams. But I don't really see it as memorable. Like I think it was a Super Bowl you're gonna remember. That's now that you're gonna look back. Well, that was a pretty good game. It was a fun game to watch. But are you gonna really think it was a great game? Was it the Seahawks Patriots in Super Bowl 49? Was it Cardinals Steelers in Super Bowl 43? I don't think so.
I mean, never had that moment. The only moment that could have been like the only moment that could count towards that got manufactured into it and into a huge controversy because of like 4, defensive interference calls that put them down at the 1, I mean, which, no matter what your opinion on that is, the moment that reffing gets into it, for me at least, once reffing inserts itself really heavily into the game and helps decide the outcome, I just kind of tune out. So for me, once that happened, I was like, this game was decent, but kind of marred. So
yeah, I agree. But like, I mean, the whole game in general, like the Super Bowl commercials were okay. They were good. They weren't great.
The halftime was okay.
The halftime show was good. I don't think it was great. It was good. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't
better than
great.
last year's, which was garbage. But
like, I think the whole Super Bowl was good, not great. I think that kind of summarized the season as well. There wasn't that team that kind of took all the spotlight on this year. Like you didn't have the Bucks from last year that, they were struggling a little bit throughout the season, but they kind of had all the spotlight because this is Brady's first year away from New England. How's he going to do? There wasn't the previous New England teams that were kind of take down the giant. There really wasn't that huge giant this year. I mean, the Packers probably had the best record. No, they had the best record in the league, right?
Yeah, well, tied for, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so I guess they may have been considered the giant, but even they haven't gotten over that hump in 10 years. So I mean, so I think it was kind of one of those seasons where there wasn't really that big time villain. And I think you need to have that big time villain or like that big time team to root for to really put a season over the edge, in my opinion. Bless you.
I was gonna ask. So I guess thinking about this because now that we're starting, the new league year is about to start, and we are called the Spicy Take Sports Podcast. So Spicy Take, who do you think will be the villain next year? Then you can pick one team. We don't have any knowledge about how it's going to go, but what's one team that you're looking towards next year?
It's a villain team. Villain team. I can tell you who I think is going to be the team that's going to get a lot of people to root for them for sure. I think the Bills are going to be that team that's going to have a lot of people to root for them because they have a young upstart team kind of this close every time. Just fell just short of the Chiefs the last 2 years. The people are going to root for them to get over the hump. But if I say the team I think is going to be like most hated, here's a huge spicy take that y'all can kick back here if you don't think it's true. But the more and more reports I see around the Bucks and what happened at the end of the year there with them, I think the San Francisco 49ers are going to be the team that's going to be hated. And I think Tom Brady's the quarterback next year.
Well, Arians came out today and said he didn't think that Brady would play next year, but doesn't mean much.
I think
the fact he can't give a guaranteed he's not playing next year when he's already retired kind of shows a lot, in my opinion. He's not filed the papers yet.
I think the most disliked team is going to be the Chiefs. I think, again, people are just going to hate on the Chiefs. And Patrick Mahomes, he's great and everything, but I think it's just like his whole trio he's got going there. It's kind of.
You hear that he might have told Siri might have told them that they can't come to the games anymore.
He said that.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And then there was that video that came out with him at a basketball game, and he said to her, "No, having a resting, B face." That happened. Yeah, I think that's just that'd be good for him if he doesn't allow them to come to games because it's just it's just another distraction, honestly. That's kind of what's put a target on his back in his career. So I think they'll probably still be just like because of that. But I think the Chargers are going to be one of the most pull for teams next year. I think with Justin Herbert and like a young core that they have going on. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs, but they're definitely another piece away from kind of doing a little damage there. So I'm definitely think the Chargers are an up and coming team that people will start rooting for, as well as the Bills, obviously.
Yeah, I think the villain team will be the 49ers. I don't think it'll be Brady at the helm, but I don't know. The 49ers, I don't know. I've never met a fan outside of like that area, the Bay Area, that I knew was from the Bay Area that liked the 49ers. I guess there's some people who liked them from back in the day when the 49ers were great in the Jerry or the Rice era and stuff like that. But I don't know. They're not a very popular team there. And then I think a team that'll get rooted for, which is going back to the AFC West again, is the Raiders. I feel like the Raiders will be a popular team to root for since they had all the stuff go down with Gruden, and I think people appreciate the fact that they kicked Gruden out on his butt, pretty much instantly when stuff happened, and then they kicked Ruggs out, and they're kind of this underdog, and then they made the playoffs here, and Carr has always been an underdog. So I feel like now with, McDaniels at the helm, maybe bringing some more innovative offense there, I think that they could be a team that people kind of have their eye on as an upstart.
Yeah, I agree that I think the Raiders could be rooted for. My only pushback to that would be McDaniels is kind of a jerk. So, I mean,
Yeah.
so that could cause a little bit of issues. But there are some really well thought of jerk coaches too. So, I don't know.
So I kind of want to ask this question kind of geared towards Caleb also. I want you to answer as well, Elijah. Where's Aaron Rodgers playing next year? If you had to put money on it.
Oh, Green Bay. I would put thousands of dollars on it. Like because they've brought back Tom Clements as the quarterback's coach to replace the guy that they had before who went to the Bears, I think. And Clements was with Green Bay back under McCarthy, and Rodgers really liked him and was sad to see him go. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't bring back a 66-year-old guy out of retirement to coach Jordan Love. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
I would agree. I mean, as much as I'd love to see him out of the NFC North, I would love to see him in Denver. Please get him there. But as much as I'd love to see that as a Vikings fan, ever since the breakup with his girlfriend happened, it's like the reports are his relationship with Green Bay is as good as it's been in years. And I don't see Green Bay moving on from Aaron Rodgers if Aaron Rodgers likes Green Bay. I just don't see it happening. I mean, I will say I think Green Bay does take a step back next year, even with Rodgers. I think that they're probably going to lose Devontae Adams unless they find.
They're going to franchise tag him. Franchise tag him.
It's a lot of money, but
it's only 17. It's like between 17 or 19 million. It's really not that bad, actually.
That's it. Oh.
Less than we were paying him last year.
I mean, they're probably going to still lose a couple guys in that defense, but I mean, I think they may take a little bit of step back. But I think if you have Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers says, "I'm not demanding a trade." You keep Aaron Rodgers. Much of a jerk as I think he is.
I do think we have an easier schedule next year. We had like one of the hardest schedules in the league this year. When you think about it, we beat 2, 3, 4, 5. Off the top of my head, I can think of 6 playoff teams that we beat.
Minnesota will have an easier schedule next year too. Because we just got an easier division this year, so it's makes me happy.
Yeah.
But so. Leading off of that, we already got to wrap up a little bit on that Super Bowl and off of the playoffs in this last season. Let's head on to the off season a little bit. We already kind of talked a little bit about the Rodgers question and about who we think is going to be the team next year. Let's get into some coaching stuff. Which hire are you all most excited for, and which one do you think is the most questionable? I'll go ahead and start this one because I'm a little biased here, to be completely honest. So I'll go ahead and give what I'm most excited for, but also give like my non-biased most excited as well. As obviously as a Vikings fan, I'm extremely excited about Kevin O'Connell. I think it's for the culture in Minnesota, it was needed to get a guy that's not a hard ass like Mike Zimmer. Like get a guy that's very well thought of, a young upstart guy. I think it was a really good hire. I mean, the Harbaugh rumors were very loud and they were legit rumors. But the whole thing about him having the job actually was completely untrue. He didn't turn down the job. The job was virtually told to him, "You've got to interview." But I love the O'Connell hire. But if I'm coming from a non-Vikings perspective, I think the best hire was probably Daboll to the Giants. I think that Brian Daboll, seeing what he did with Josh Allen, going from who I thought was going to be a huge bust in that draft, that he couldn't hit the side of a barn if he tried, to now probably being a top 3 quarterback in the entire league. It's really, really impressive. And I actually don't think they take a quarterback with either one of their first round picks this year. I think they end up trying to see if they can salvage Daniel Jones with Brian Daboll. I mean, he's got a very similar body to Josh Allen, gets very similar athleticism. Can he get that other stuff out of him is the question. And I think that was just a really good hire. If it doesn't work with Daniel Jones, next year's a much better quarterback class. So you may be able to take a just shot there. But I think it's just a really, really good hire. Worst hire has got to be Houston. Lovie Smith, really? Like,
There's nothing else to say there. I mean, just what else can you say? But just like, I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with it, in my opinion.
he would have been a bad D coordinator hire. Like,
I don't know. Lovey's just so, I don't know. I don't think Lovey's a bad D coordinator hire. When I think of Lovey with the Bears, I just think of like, it's just a raspberry noise. It's just, that's all I can think of. Just, I mean, they weren't bad. They weren't good. They just existed. They existed to kind of semi be a thorn in your butt, but mostly just get their ass kicked, so.
Part of the reason I think it's such a bad hire though is we don't get political on the show, but I will say the whole Brian Flores thing was just a crap show in itself, to be honest. And I really do think the reason that they hired Lovie Smith is because they wanted to hire a black coach that they don't have to stick to that long.
But you know who their secondary guy was that they were
Josh
interviewing?
McCown, apparently.
Josh McCown. I mean, I would take Lovey over McCown.
You got to think about it. I mean, they're wanting to hire McCown. I mean, with Brian Flores being technically a finalist in their coaching search, think about the type of backups they would have got, or they would have hired this white guy with no coaching experience. I mean, I think it was really a token black coach hire, honestly, in my opinion. And I think Lovie Smith's gone at the end of next year, and they go out and get Josh McCown next year.
Well, it could be, I was wondering about this. This is my spicy take. They hired him because remember there's that affirmative action coaching thing that if you hire a black coach, you get extra draft picks or something. Isn't you get a compensatory 3rd round selection or something? They just fire his ass next year and they got that extra selection. It's I mean, they knew they're going to be cheeks this year anyway. So why not just get an extra 3rd round pick anyway?
It's ridiculous, but it's true. I
mean, they didn't have any good choices at coaching candidates by the time they actually got around to wanting to hire someone. So just hire an African American, get the extra pick, fire his ass, and then move on from there. But that might be a little far out.
What about you guys? What do you think is the best and worst hires? I know what your worst hire is. There, Caleb.
What do you think, Colton?
I think one that kind of an underrated hire. I think Doug Peterson is actually really not that bad of a hire for the Jags. I mean, there's really not a ton of coaches out right now that really jump out at you. But I mean, he had success in Philadelphia. He won a Super Bowl ring. I mean, if you can win a Super Bowl ring with Nick Foles and essentially Carson Wentz in the one season, I mean, you can do some damage with I think Trevor Lawrence if you can piece together and they can draft correctly. But I mean, I think my least favorite hire, I'd probably I'd say the same thing. I was looking at that earlier about coaches, and I saw Lovie Smith. I'm just why? It's below average hire. It's just kind of cool. It's Lovie Smith. Yeah, he was mediocre everywhere he's been. So, but I think you may be onto something. I think really they just hired him for certain reasons to maybe get the extra draft pick because they're gonna be probably win 2-3 games again.
If that.
Yeah, if that, might as well, right? Might as well. I don't know how they won 4 games last year, 3 or 4 games last year.
What's the quarterback they took from Stanford? What was his
Davis
name?
Mills.
Davis Mills.
Mills was
last
not
year.
bad actually. Though.
Not bad.
I was surprised how
He was much better than
non-horrible
a
he
lot of
was.
He was a lot better than a lot of the quarterbacks we thought were much better than him. So
I think he would have been worth a late first round pick if you could watch his season in its entirety. Because I watched
yeah.
a decent amount of his games. And
he has some sort of franchise quarterback traits.
I would have taken him over Trask in a heartbeat.
Oh, for sure. I do have a question. If you don't know, you said that your best hire, one of your best hires was Peterson. I think there's a couple. I think that I agree that it was a pretty good hire for Jacksonville. I don't think it would have worked with many other teams. I think he wants a lot of control of the front office. But Trent Baalke is such a bad GM. It's probably a good idea that they hired him. But is there any concern for you from that perspective that he wasn't really their first option? Apparently, the options before him, they wanted Hackett and they also wanted Byron Leftwich more than they did Peterson. But both of them said no because they didn't want to work with Baalke. Does it make you worry about that at all, or do you think that they just kind of lucked into a good hire?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think mainly though, I think they just kind of got the right guy. I mean, he's someone that I think will bring clarity to Jacksonville right now because, as last season, as we've seen from bar pictures of Urban Meyer's shenanigans, kind of going to bring some sanity back to that locker room that's much needed. So with that said, Byron Leftwich, I think is going to be an amazing head coach when he gets the shot for the right team. But I think right now, I think it's probably one of the best hires they could get personally for their situation. Like you said, it wouldn't work out for every team. I think since it's in Jacksonville and the situation there, and them just being a bad team, I think kind of gives him some leeway and see what he can do.
What's your coaching hires here, Caleb? What's your best?
I mean, it would be easier, honestly, to say which ones I dislike because I don't think there's that many good ones. So, I think you guys hit on the two good ones. The other one I will say that I like, I think Mike McDaniel will be good. I think he's somewhere in between LaFleur and Zach Taylor. Like, I think he actually knows how to run an offense, but I'm not sure he has the personality chops like LaFleur does. Like, I think he might be honestly better than LaFleur at calling plays based on what I've read and what I've heard, but I'm not sure he's quite the character guy that LaFleur is in the locker room. Because if we're being honest, I think that the way that LaFleur handles that locker room is really one of the only reasons the Packers play as well as they do. Like, the players love playing for him. But sometimes the offensive calling is meh. But I like McDaniels on top of the two guys that you listed. The one that I guess this is a little bit more outside the realm, one that I think was really stupid was just the promotion of Dennis Allen going from defensive coordinator, head coach. First off, that might be out of all the head coaches, it's the hugest drop off because Sean Payton is a legitimate Hall of Fame candidate for head coaching, in my opinion. Well, aside from the Bounty Gate stuff, but I think he has a shot at it at least. And Dennis Allen has an overall head coaching record of 8-28 with the Raiders from 2012 to 2014. Not to mention something that has always bothered me that Chicago does this on a yearly basis, and they did it again, is when teams that are really bad on one side of the ball, but then good on the other side of the ball, hire a coach that is really good at the one side of the ball that they're already good at. It makes no sense to me. If your team is really good on defense, you have a good defense, and it actually has the personnel for being a good defense, why would you then go and hire a defensive head coach and just leave your offense out to dry? It's moronic.
Especially with a young quarterback like Justin Fields that you think is your franchise guy, and then you go out and hire a defensive coach. Just makes no sense.
Yeah, I was about to say, for me, it was between Eberflus and Allen for which one I liked worse for being a new one that we hadn't talked about. But I think it goes to Allen because of the drop off. And
I would probably go Eberflus over Allen just because I don't think the Saints really had too much of an option. Because Sean Payton kind of pulled himself out of the race, kind of retired out of nowhere. That wasn't really out of nowhere, but it was after a lot of the top candidates already been hired. So, technically, I guess they could have went after O'Connell. They could have went after some of the other guys, like Raheem Morris from the Rams, something like that. That I think would have been a little bit better of a hire than Dennis Allen. But
I would have preferred Raheem Morris or freaking Byron Leftwich from the Buccaneers, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
I think Byron Leftwich would be almost perfect for that Chicago job. Offensive minded, former quarterback. I mean, he'd probably be good for Justin Fields, but
He played with a similar style to Justin Fields
Mhm.
too, so yeah. But the Bears will universally suck, which is always something that it's death taxes and the Bears being dog crap. So
that's one thing that me and Caleb can get along about too.
is the Bears sucking?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, if I had to rank the top 3 hires, I think I'd probably go Dayball 1. I think I'd probably go O'Connell 2 and probably Doug Peterson 3. I mean, I just think those are, I mean, also I think Josh McDaniels could be in that conversation. I just don't know. We've not seen him as a head coach since the whole debacle that happened at the end of the time in Denver. So we'll kind of see what happens there. His success has kind of been with Tom Brady pretty much his whole time, except for 1 year with Mac Jones. So, but yeah, so on from the coaching, I think there's gonna be some interesting. I mean, the coaching stuff I think is gonna make it really interesting next season. I mean, you're virtually gonna have completely different teams pretty much. I mean, I think it's gonna be kind of cool to see. Going from that, obviously, this is very tentative. Draft is pending. Obviously, we don't know who's going to get drafted by who. We don't know the free agency stuff. Based off of like who you know is coming back to these rosters, coaching changes, people you know probably are going to be leaving. Who do you think is going to be like kind of the biggest disappointment next year from this past year, like biggest drop off?
It's a good question. Talking about like who made the playoffs or just in general?
Just team, yeah, pretty much teams that are going to make. I mean, mine would actually probably be the Super Bowl champions. I think the Rams might win 10 games next year. I think they're gonna lose a few key guys. I mean, Odell's out for probably all next season, so he probably won't. So you're virtually gonna be having just Cooper Kupp or receiver for at least halfway through the year next year until Robert Woods comes back healthy. Like,
it worked for the last drive, but it won't work the whole season.
they'll probably draft someone. Not to mention though, I don't know. I've never understood Van Jefferson is underutilized in that offense, but
he is a little bit. He's definitely underutilized, but I just feel like there's a lot of holes in that roster that could come up as when you get to the cap situation. But
I think
Yeah.
actually Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is going to drop off a little bit because I mean Chris Godwin's for his ACL, but he's also going to be a free agent. I mean Fournette, I believe he'll be a free agent. Huh?
no Tom Brady.
Hey, yeah, that was getting that. No Tom Brady, which is the final and the biggest one, because he really led the league in passing yards this year
And touchdowns.
and touchdowns, and he's just like deuces. I mean, he is almost 45, but still, I mean, he could have played at least one more year.
oh yeah.
I mean, not that he isn't. I mean, who knows? He could go to San Fran or come back to Tampa, but in my opinion, he's retired. But I don't. I think it's going to be Tampa, and I hate to say it as a Falcons fan, but what a career we just watched. We just watched our generation's Michael Jordan. I mean, with Tom Brady, we're never going to see him win 7 rings again in our lifetime.
It's not over.
God, please let it be over.
San Francisco
Go to San Fran and win a
2022.
ring.
If he goes to San Fran, I'm not going to watch football this year.
He'll probably
They may
win.
go,
I mean,
they may
they'll
go
probably
15-2, 16-1, something like that.
It's stupid. The only
They're like
weakness on that roster was quarterback and cornerback.
They'll get the quarterback with the GOAT. So
with the goat. Who can
There you
still
go.
swing it at 45?
And have Debo Samuel out of the backfield. That would be stupid. I refuse to think about that. You're depressing me. So
You're depressing me. And
How
that,
about you,
I mean,
Caleb?
that defense is also disgusting too. On top of that, so
Nuts.
biggest drop off though. Yeah. Okay, well, Colton, I would kind of agree with yours, except my crazy theory that we could get into another podcast is that I think that Russell Wilson goes to the Bucks.
I've actually heard that.
I could see it happening. I think the team that'll drop off the most. I mean, personally, I think it'll probably be the Cowboys.
See that?
Like, I mean, first off, the Cowboys didn't do much anyway, but I don't know.
Mike
I have
McCarthy's
no-
not a good coach.
No, he's not. And they're coming off so many injuries already. I don't know who's going to be healthy for the start of the year. And Zeke is another year older and fatter. And I don't know if Amari Cooper really wants to be there anymore, to be honest. That defense, which kind of came together and looks so nice next year, has a lot of guys who stepped up and played big roles last year that I don't think people expected them to play as well as they did. Like Jaron Kearse, for example, at safety, who came in and played like 97% of snaps. And, I mean, that came out of nowhere.
He sucked in Minnesota too. Like,
He played good in that in that robber role where they'd have him playing like tight end coverage, though he just stunk in zone.
yeah, but
But-
then he decided to get a DUI out of nowhere, which kind of cost him his roster spot too.
I know. I was always a big Jaron Kearse fan. So it sucked when he went to Minnesota, and it sucked even more when he got cut. But yeah, I just think it's all gonna blow up in McCarthy's face. Dallas is too much of a high pressure thing. I mean, it's just like a freaking pressure cooker that somehow manages to get more pressure in it every year. I don't know how you could possibly at this point even put more pressure on Dallas, but they try to. And I mean, if we're being honest, aside from Dak and a couple of receivers like CeeDee Lamb and yeah. Well, Amari Cooper, I'm
Michael
thinking
Gallup.
the Gallup, but he's a free agent. Who was the number one? It's number one that they had, who was their number 4 wide receiver, but he came in after Gallup got hurt. I can't think of his name. Short guy who was Cedric Wilson, maybe?
Yeah, that's it.
I think it's Cedric Wilson. Like Cedric Wilson kind of came out of nowhere and was good. But aside from a couple of those guys, their offensive line is aging and going to start retiring or dropping off soon. DeMarcus Lawrence can't do it by himself, and their defensive line is trash. Their linebacking core is Micah Parsons and nothing else. And their cornerback room is a bunch of old dudes. Their safety
Trayvon
room is a bunch
Diggs.
of old dudes. Trayvon Diggs is so overrated. I mean,
He is
it's great
very
to have
overrated.
interceptions, but the fact that he also
Get burned
allowed,
every other play.
I was about to say, he gets an interception for every 3 times that he gives up a touchdown. So
Yeah. So, just kind of going from that prediction to getting into a little bit of draft stuff, just kind of obviously we have the big mock draft coming up in about a week. That's going to be really, really enjoyable. We're gonna really enjoy that. But coming up from that, kind of getting a little bit of a preview. So I want to ask y'all about this quarterback class. Obviously, it's been a very crappy looking quarterback class going into it. I think there are some guys that have some sort of potential to be very good, but they just have a lot of work to go. I just want to kind of have you all, who are your, I mean, the 6 quarterbacks that are kind of discussed right now. The fact there's 6 of them shows how weak the top of the class really is. Right now, so you have Willis, Corral, Pickett, Ritter, Howell, and Carson Strong. How would you rank these guys? I mean, I don't think that any of them are, I don't think there's any really right or wrong answers here because they all kind of have their big time flaws. How would you rank these guys? Just
In terms of like who I want starting for my franchise or just from 1 to 6?
like go from 1 to 6 of who you think is the best here and who you think is the best guy for the long term.
For the long term, I think Kenny Pickett is number 1. I think he's probably the safest pick in my opinion. I think number 6 is, I've actually thought about this a lot recently, is probably Malik Willis, just because like he has a lot of potential, but he also has the most possibility for bust. So I'd probably go Pickett, Corral, Ritter. Who is the 4th one you said?
Howell and Strong.
Yeah, I'd say probably Howell 4, Strong 5, and Willis 6.
Who do you go?
I think I'd go Corral 1, Pickett 2, Howell 3, Willis 4, Strong 5, Ritter 6.
Yeah, I'd probably gonna
Ritter
I'm
had
gonna
a horrible Senior Bowl, like
He did.
awful.
His issue is accuracy, which is kind of
And
a
he's
scary thing for me.
He's a redshirt senior. You can't have issues with accuracy when you've been in college since, my grandma was, young and exciting. But
On a run.
It's impressive from your grandma, brother.
Yeah. Playing the high level.
But yeah, I'm gonna go Corral 1. I know we him from an RPO offense, but I think the league's going more towards RPO. And I really like his leadership. He's got a good arm, pretty accurate. Just needs to develop on getting some reads. I think if he gets with a good quarterback coach, he could definitely end up developing. He's got all the skills. He just needs to develop on the reads, which I think you could definitely develop those as you get to a good. I mean, Josh Allen wasn't very good at reading a defense at first, and now look at him now. I think I'm going to go Howell too. I have a lot of faith in Sam Howell. I mean, the guy was supposed to be the top pick in the draft this year before the season started. And he ends up playing for a North Carolina team that lost every single offensive weapon and had an absolute garbage defense. And then he was virtually told he had to do everything pretty much. So, I mean, I don't think we should really judge a guy off of having to, when they're literally throwing with a pretty much garbage team around him. And I think he's got that it factor about him that I think you should take a shot on him if you really. I think him in Pittsburgh would be great with Mike Tomlin. I think it'd be a great fit. My number 3 is Kenny Pickett. The hand size just scares me, to be completely honest. I mean, I know he played at Pittsburgh and I know he uses 2 gloves, but the guy's got smaller hands than the average adult man, which is kind of scary as an NFL quarterback.
It's kind of weird.
My 4 is probably Willis, I think. But again, I think he's got so much bust potential. But the guy's got the highest potential in this draft as well. So I don't know. 5 is probably Strong. I think he's got the best arm of anybody in the class. But the guy's literally missing cartilage in his knee, which is definitely not a good sign. And then Ritter's my 6 as well. As much as I wish that Ritter would be really good in the league, because I think he's a really good leader. You can't be inaccurate in the NFL. You just can't. Yeah. So last thing before we end this podcast, we're running into the last couple of minutes of this time. When it comes to your number 1 takeaway from this past year, and then also like what we've seen so far with coaching changes and all that, what do you think is the number 1 takeaway for the league in totality that you could see as being seen? I mean, for me, I think it's just offense is what's most important right now. I mean, I know that the defenses in the Super Bowl are pretty good, but if you look at all the coaching hires that we considered were good, they were all offensive guys. And you look at all the teams with the best records in the league, they were all offense. It's all those quarterbacks and offensive guys.
I would say, yeah, it's definitely still an offensive league. And make sure your team has an offensive line so your quarterback doesn't get killed. I think that's probably one of the main takeaways.
I think my main takeaway was just that consistency is key. If your team can perform on a weekly basis at a certain level, even if it's not capable of necessarily beating a team that's capable of performing at a higher level, if you're always able to perform at that same level, then you have a much higher chance of winning.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, we'll get looking forward to the podcast of the draft podcast as well as the other sports wrap ups. And just stay tuned. We're excited to be back, and thank you all. Cool to be back.